Hi, welcome to the Midnight Quilt Show. Tonight, we're gonna use strip piecing to make our quilt, making blocks, sashing, and borders. Plus, I'm gonna show you how to use washi tape to keep that piecing seam accurate. Let's get started. All right, I've got three very important things. I have my quilting juice, my snack, and this box of beautiful fabric that's gonna turn into our quilt tonight. Now, as you can see, I have some beautiful shades. This is my light selection of the Boundless Botanicals. Then, not to be confused with the light, I have the light medium version. Then going on into the medium, beautiful, and then even on into the dark. So I have a stack of very beautiful fabrics, and I need to get them cut up into strips. So I'm starting with the lightest and gonna get cutting because all these are different kind of widths, 1 3/4 inches, like I'm gonna remember that. I put some washi tape on my ruler to help give me a good visual reference so I don't, cut it 1 1/2 or 1 and whatever. What is beyond that? 2. By the way, if you want the links to the fabric or the pattern I'm using, it's in the YouTube description below. So click it. No, really, like right now, go click it. Okay, we'll do it after the video. All these strips that are 1 3/4 inches are gonna start by being my center of mine, the little bitty 9 patches in the middle. Love it. Try to work my way through all these pretty colors. The problem is I keep getting distracted because it's so beautiful. That pink. What's great about having that washi tape on my ruler is I don't have to worry about where my fabric is on the board. I just throw it down and line it up, cut along the ruler. And if it's not quite perfect, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm just gonna keep on cutting and stacking up these pretty colors. All right, now it's time to cut the wider strips, and what I've been doing is taking my fabric and then just folding it over. That means I can use this littler cutting mat, but what I'm doing is before I start, I'm just checking to make sure that the 2 edges are parallel. If they're not, my strips won't be perfectly straight. I mean, I would totally blame it on the rotary cutter if that happens, but trying to keep it somewhat precise, especially since it's still early in the evening. All right, since I'm working with the 4 1/4, I'm pulling out my huge ruler. Goodness, this thing is big. It's bigger than my cutting mat. All right, forgot to put my washi tape on here. I'm only cutting a few, so surely it'll be fine. 1/4 inch, that's right in between the 1/2 and the 4. I think that should be right. We'll find out soon enough, won't we? All right, working my way through the medium colors. Actually, these are the medium light. It took me a while to get these all sorted out. I actually had to do it not up here because the light's artificial. I went and hid out on the porch and did it during the afternoon. I mean, I'm not sure what my neighbors thought was happening. There I am on the porch, surrounded by fabric, talking to myself. It's kind of weird that they won't let the kids come over and play anymore. There's that pink. I love how this print is so nice and subtle. I think it's gonna give a nice touch to my quilt and make it look a little bit more depth than just your regular solid fabric. And those shades of the color are really gonna help make the pattern look awesome. I'm excited to see how it looks when it comes together. Whew. That was hard work. Now I'm doing the larger strips. Right, all my pretty colors are cut up and it's time to cut all this white fabric, which is gonna actually end up being the little cute little corner squares on this pattern. Whew, I'm almost done. So I'd love to hear how you stay on track with your cutting. Do you still tape from your family members or do you have a special technique that works for you? Leave a comment down below because every once in a while I like to pop in and see what people are saying. All right, time to start sewing. I'm gonna use my washi tape to mark a 1/4 inch line on my sewing machine. That way it'll help me keep my seam allowance somewhat consistent because at this time of the night, who knows what you're gonna get. Love this tape, it's so versatile. Washi, washi. I feel like the more I say it, the weirder it sounds. Whatever it is, I love it. All right, now it's time to sew, sew, sew. And I'm just gonna start pairing these up. And it's so nice and mindless. Get that, so nice and mindless. Because all I have to do is sew a white strip to each side of all these colored strips I have pulled out. So really, I could zone out if I wanted to. And I feel like this whole time I've been kind of living a lie. Because in all my other episodes, I'm actually pinning, but I don't pin normally. So this time I'm gonna be my real self and just not pin it. What I'm doing is looking ahead down here by the washi tape and just kind of keeping it lined up. Is it gonna be perfect? Probably not, but close enough is good enough, right? I could go ahead and pull that off and sew the white strip on the other side, but I'm gonna go ahead and keep chain piecing where I just keep on sewing. I love using the walking foot for this too because it really helps pull that fabric through and helps keep it nice and smooth. Normally I would just keep going, but I'm excited to see what this is gonna look like. Now I've got my two fabrics sewed together. It's only a mini strip unit at this point. I still need to sew the white on the other side. That's 2 down, a whole lot more to go. So here's my units and I'm gonna start cutting. So when I'm subcutting my strip units, first I'm straightening it up because nobody needs all that jazz right there. And what I tend to do, now I don't know if it's right, but when I'm subcutting my units, what I'm doing is lining up the 1 3/4 inch, but I'm also using one of these reference lines right here and kind of keeping it parallel to those seams. That way if there is a little, wiggle room or inappropriately cut, it's on the edge and that's still nice and centered, which I don't know. I think I might be overthinking that too much. Never mind, just pretend I didn't say that. I'm gonna cut, 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 and after I have a few more drinks, I might turn into kind of like a hibachi grill, right? Kind of flip them up. That looks so much cooler in my head. All right, I think that's enough yellows. Let's see if I can make it this time. That was closer than last time. So, I may have lied to you earlier. There is actually one unit that has white in the center and not on the sides. Of course, I didn't realize that, so it was time to, start cutting. So that's what you have me for, right? To figure out all these mistakes so that you don't make them. Now, the one thing about this show is you don't really get the authentic experience because normally when I'm cutting, I'm listening to music. I've got my headphones on and I'm listening to something that's probably more upbeat, either an audiobook of something of questionable value, maybe like a little trashy, or some really upbeat music like country or heavy metal, or just anything I can sing to, really. I'm sure my family loves it because I've got my headphones on. I can't even hear my voice and I am just belting it out. Sometimes I get the rotary cutter going, it's fantastic, until it wakes them all up. So heavy metal, really, that is true. The thing is, I need upbeat music to keep me going, so I'm thinking like good old school Metallica, Five Finger Death Punch. I don't know, I'm starting to question my life choices at this moment. Don't judge me. What do you listen to when you're quilting? All right, so these are my little ones. Let's go to turbo mode and get these things cut fast. What I'm gonna do is stack them up and cut them apart. You could actually do more than 2 layers at a time. You could even go up to 8 if you wanna be wild and crazy, but it's getting a little late. I've had a couple of sips, so I'm gonna stick with the 2 layers. All right, taking these little blocks and making a bigger block, which I think is so funny about quilting, right? We get a bunch of fabric, we cut it up, sew it back together to cut it up, but the result is always something really pretty. So here is my cute little baby 9 patch. That's just so freaking adorable. And then I'm gonna start building it up. All right, once I get the hang of this, it actually gets pretty easy, but it's very important, the fabric placement, the colors, because I want the oranges staying together and the pink staying together. If I get a piece that's not in there in the right spot, it's gonna be really noticeable. And if I make mistakes, I want them to at least not be very noticeable. It may not look like it right now, but this is gonna be a beautiful quilt block. And this quilt has the same quilt block used over and over and over again. So now that I have it in position where I need it to go, now I can just put all the fabric pieces and stack them up. That way I can start chain piecing them or batch sewing them. Go. That way I don't have to come up with the arrangement each time, because obviously that will take too long. So you might be wondering why I'm using this leader, and that would be a good thing to wonder. This is actually helping me keep my string short so I don't have those long threads at the end of each row, and it's a tip I just picked up. So once I have my blocks all laid out, it's pretty easy. I just have to remember, do the center and then side, side, top, bottom. Side, side, top, bottom. And if I have to talk to myself to remember, then that's completely fine. All right, here we go. Aw, what's that? Looks like my fabric got jammed. Let me fix that real quick. Normally I would just totally leave it in, but I don't know, since you're watching me and it has to kind of look somewhat good. Of course, if it were in the center of the block, there's no way I'd be fixing it. But since it's a little snip, little rip, and easy fix. Oh, much better. You know what time it is. Time to do that again and again and again and again. So I'm gonna lay these blocks out for my first row. And as you can see, they're all going the same direction, but now the fun is when you rotate the colors to get them to match up. Next, I'm gonna lay the pieces in between the blocks and the sashing for the bottoms. I am loving how this is looking. Now it's time for a good old-fashioned sew down. I don't know why I started talking Southern there, but it works. This first row is looking good. Kind of like slices of brightly colored fruit. Get it? Fruit slices? All right, never mind, not funny. Now on to the next. So the quilt middle is done and I just have to add the borders on. And the color placement in the borders is just as important as the blocks. So after I sew my white strip on, I'm gonna make sure that the borders that I put together line up just with the illustrations with the pattern. And you'll see why that's important in just a moment. Now, let me get that sewn together. My border is attached. I've sewed the inner border and the pieced outer border, and I'm loving how those colors just wrap right around. I can't wait to get started in quilting and show you how I'm gonna quilt these borders. Let's get to it. Wait, where's my wine? Like always, I put together some quilting diagrams for you. The turn in early, which has the easier option, or the up all night quilting. So let's get started. All right, now that I'm ready to quilt this quilt, one of my favorite things to do is pick 2 different designs and alternate between them. In the longer strip, I'm quilting the ribbon candy. I love this for those thinner sashings, and I'm just gonna work my way all the way to the opposite end. And I'm trying to keep them as consistently sized as possible, but I'm not worrying about it too much because it is late after all. Now, once I get to the bottom, I'm gonna use traveling and travel along the edge of that seam to get me to the next strip where I'm gonna quilt the wishbone design. Now, alternating between 2 designs keeps me from getting bored, which is always a good thing, but I also like how it has different textures. So this wishbone design, as I'm working my way from edge to edge, I'm quilting these loops. And I'm trying to keep the loops consistent in size, of course, but I'm just trying to make the design progress along in the same motion. So I'm trying to keep these angles somewhat parallel. Again, if you're just trying to get this quilted, don't worry about that. But if you're trying to master that, it's really gonna help to keep those lines parallel. Then once I get to the edge, I'm gonna do that little traveling along the seam again to get to the next smallest size and go right into my ribbon candy. Now what's fun is since I'm traveling in between the blocks, I can quilt this whole block without starting and stopping. Now when I get to that 9 patch, I'm gonna actually do a continuous curve design. Now what I love about continuous curve is it's such a basic design, a basic way to work your way around the quilt, but man, it's so easy. And I'm gonna go from one corner to the next, quilting a curved line. And I'm trying to make that line touch the next corner. And I could do just one block. I could go from corner to corner to corner, returning to where I started, or I can actually quilt this whole 9 patch without starting and stopping, which is ideal for me, of course. So I'm gonna quilt a curved line, and then when I go to do my next one, I'm gonna do a whole row where I'm making a serpentine kind of line that goes from one side, crosses that corner, and onto the next and back and forth. So it's kind of wrapping its way back and forth to the opposite edge. And then I'm gonna come back to where I started. I will say the one thing I'm not worrying about, because it is way too late at night, is these curves. They don't have to be perfect. I'm not worried if one curve is small or the next is bigger. I'm just really trying to get them to cross on those points. So if you're trying this and you're trying to focus on something, just focus on those points and don't worry about the curves. And what's nice is I can continue on quilting all those continuous curves in all those white blocks. So when I see these little white cornerstones, that's my cue that I'm gonna quilt curved lines in those as well. Now what's great is I was able to quilt that whole block without starting and stopping, just alternating between those 2 basic designs. Next, I'm gonna go right into quilting the borders. Now for the borders, I love quilting pieced borders because those strips are already sewn for me. All I have to do is connect those lines. Now, of course, since I have 2 diagrams for you to work with, the turn in early just has us doing basic stitching in the ditch. Now, stitching in the ditch is not a dirty word. It's a great thing. That's what helps us move around the quilt. So what I'm doing is just stitching along that seam, traveling along the edge of the quilt, and then back down the next one. This kind of helps keep it all in place without the quilting overwhelming that beautiful color gradation that I took so long to put together. But since I want to add a little bit more detail to my quilting, I mean, we do know I love to quilt things till they're dead, I'm going to quilt a line that curves out to the opposite side of the border and then back on the next side. So basically going from point to point, kind of coming out at an arc and then coming back. Now what I'm trying to do is keep the points of my arcs from going all the way to the edge of the border, because when I bind it, it'll cut off that point, but I don't know, maybe it's not even worth worrying about at this point. But what's nice is I can add 1 row of arcs and then I can travel along that seam and then quilt another row so that they offset and overlap the previous one. Kind of makes it look kind of elegant, don't you think? Well, I think, if I do say so myself. All right, that's a lot of quilting to do, so I'm gonna get working on this quilt. I'll see you at the end. This quilt is FFF, finally freaking finished. When I started, it looked really complex, but I quickly realized it was just the same block used over and over again. Thanks so much for joining me. Now be sure not to miss any of my episodes of the Midnight Quilt Show. You can do that by subscribing. It's right down there. Just click that subscribe button. I'll wait here for you while you do that. Thanks so much and have a great night. Happy quilting!